January 24th, 1989, Florida State Prison. The sky glows orange over the razor wire. Reporters crowd the gates, and people are chanting one name, Ted Bundy. Inside, behind the concrete walls, Bundy, once called charming, intelligent, even handsome, sits in a small, dimly lit cell. His hands tremble slightly as he looks up at the flickering fluorescent light. It's almost time. The guards outside the door are silent. The air feels heavy, like the whole country is holding its breath. Because this isn't just any execution. This is the end of one of the most terrifying cases in American history. A man who used a smile as a weapon, who fooled the police, the press, and even the people who loved him, all while leaving a trail of unimaginable horror behind. But here's the twist. This wasn't supposed to happen. Ted Bundy was never meant to be caught. He'd escaped twice. He'd driven across states under fake names. He'd outsmarted the system until his own arrogance brought him down. So how did a law student with a clean record and perfect manners become America's most infamous killer? And what tiny mistake finally led to his capture? Let's rewind the clock. It's 1974. Seattle, Washington. A young woman named Linda and Healy disappears from her basement room near the University of Washington. She's popular, athletic, responsible, the kind of person who doesn't just vanish. Her bed is neatly made, but under the covers, there's something strange, a dark red stain on the pillow. Her clothes for the next day are gone, along with her purse. There's no sign of struggle, no fingerprints, no forced entry. Police are baffled. Within months, other young women across Washington and Oregon start to vanish. Janice Ott, Denise Naslin, Georgianne Hawkins. All in broad daylight. All young, all college students, all gone without a trace. The only clue? Witnesses mention a man named Ted. He's polite, well-dressed, often wearing a fake arm cast, asking women for help loading his sailboat or carrying books to his car. And yes, always the same thing, a tan Volkswagen Beetle. To the outside world, Ted Bundy looked like the kind of man you could trust. He was studying law, volunteering for a political campaign, even dating a woman named Elizabeth Klopfer, who had no idea the man she loved was leading a double life. Bundy blended in so perfectly that even when the police released a composite sketch of Ted, he didn't panic. His friend saw the sketch, laughed, and said, "That can't be you." And Ted? He smiled and said, "Of course not." For months, Bundy's charm shielded him. He attended law school classes by day, and at night he hunted. But arrogance is a dangerous thing. By mid-1975, Bundy moved to Utah for law school. Soon after, women began disappearing there too. Same pattern, same car, same story. One night, in August 1975, a police officer in Utah noticed a tan Volkswagen Beetle driving suspiciously. The driver tried to avoid him, turned off his headlights, and kept glancing in the mirror. The officer pulled him over. When Ted Bundy stepped out, he was calm, polite, even charming, the kind of man you wouldn't expect to be in trouble. But the officer noticed something odd inside the car. A ski mask, a crowbar, handcuffs, rope, a strange collection of tools no normal law student should have. Bundy claimed it was all a misunderstanding, but the officer didn't buy it. That traffic stop was the beginning of the end, though no one knew it yet. Back in Seattle, Elizabeth, Bundy's girlfriend, started connecting the dots. She remembered the nights he disappeared without explanation, the strange mood swings, the time she found plaster of Paris in his bathroom. She called the police 3 separate times to tell them she suspected Ted Bundy, but they didn't believe her. There were hundreds of Teds in the area, and besides, this Ted was too clean-cut, too intelligent. The system looked the other way, and more women vanished. By late 1975, Bundy's mask was slipping. A woman named Carol Durant was attacked in a mall parking lot in Murray, Utah, by a man posing as a police officer. He said her car had been broken into and asked her to follow him to station. But once she got into his Volkswagen, she realized something was wrong. When Bundy tried to handcuff her, she fought back, kicking, screaming, scratching. She escaped, running into traffic and waving down a car for help. Her courage saved her life and changed the case forever. Police found handcuff marks on her wrists, and when she described the car, it matched Bundy's perfectly. They arrested him, but even in custody, Ted Bundy acted like the smartest man in the room. He insisted he was innocent, studied his own case, and represented himself in court. And at first, it worked. People wanted to believe him. He was handsome, articulate, and persuasive, the kind of criminal America had never seen before. But behind that smile, something far darker was at work. When officers searched his apartment, they found eerie clues: a stack of maps, photos of potential victims, and plaster to fake injuries. The puzzle pieces were coming together. Yet even then, Bundy refused to show fear. He was confident, smooth, almost smug, and soon he'd prove that arrogance could go even further than anyone imagined. Because before his trial could even begin, Ted Bundy would do the unthinkable. He was supposed to be under 24-hour watch in a small Colorado jail. He had no money, no connections, no one left to trust. But Bundy had one thing the others didn't: patience. He started losing weight, studying the guards' routines. And late one night, while everyone was distracted, he squeezed through a tiny hole in the ceiling above his cell light fixture, barely 12 inches wide, and vanished into the darkness. By the time the guards noticed, Ted Bundy was already gone. It's the winter of 1977, and snow blankets the mountains around Glenwood Springs, Colorado. Inside a small jail, Ted Bundy, once a promising law student, now accused of kidnapping, sits on his bunk with a calm smile. His brown hair is neat, his posture confident, and his eyes coldly focused. He's not thinking about his defense anymore. He's thinking about something else: freedom. Because Ted Bundy isn't just a criminal. He's a master manipulator. He knows how people think, how they act, and most dangerously, how to make them underestimate him. For weeks, Bundy's been studying every inch of his cell, every sound, every schedule, every guard rotation. He's noticed a pattern. When the courthouse across the street gets busy, the jail gets quiet. Guards grow relaxed. That's when he starts his plan. It begins with small favors. Bundy befriends the guards, jokes with them, even shares his legal opinions. They call him Ted the Law Student. He's polite, clean-cut, and helpful. Slowly, the walls between prisoner and guard start to fade. No one's suspect that behind the smile, Bundy is preparing one of the boldest escapes in American criminal history. By June 1977, Bundy's trial for the murder of Karen Campbell, a young nurse who vanished from a Colorado lodge, is underway. The evidence against him is strong. But Bundy has an idea: represent himself. It's a legal loophole that gives him one privilege others don't: access to the courthouse law library. No guards watching his every move. No bars. Just freedom within walls. On June 7th, during a recess, Bundy asked to visit the law library. He's escorted upstairs. The window is open. A warm mountain breeze drifts through. A guard leaves him alone for just a few minutes. That's all Bundy needs. He looks around. No one's watching. He quietly removes his jacket, steps onto the bookshelf, and, unbelievably, leaps out the second-floor window. He falls, hits the ground hard, sprains his ankle, but he doesn't stop. He runs into the woods, leaving behind books, papers, and chaos. By the time the guards realize what happened, Ted Bundy has vanished again. For 6 days, he hides in the Colorado wilderness. He steals food, clothes, even a car. But the wilderness isn't kind to him. He's cold, hurt, and starving. Eventually, a deputy spots him driving erratically. When they pull him over, Bundy's charm returns instantly. "Oh, officer, just a misunderstanding." But it's too late. They know who he is. Bundy is captured. Again, when he's brought back to jail, reporters swarm the scene. Cameras flash. Bundy smiles, brushes his hair back, and says, "Well, I certainly learned my lesson." But he hasn't, not even close. Because as soon as he's locked up, Bundy begins working on escape plan number 2. He's moved to a more secure jail in Garfield County, Colorado. This time, they think they've outsmarted him. But Bundy is patient, always patient. He studies, exercises, and waits. The jail's roof is directly above his cell. Between them is a small crawl space. Bundy notices that the ceiling panel above his bunk is loose. So, over weeks, he loses weight, dropping over 30 pounds by skipping meals. He hides the food in napkins and flushes it down the toilet. No one notices. On the night of December 30th, 1977, the town is celebrating the holidays. Most guards are home, the jail is quiet, and the snow outside muffles all sound. Bundy pushes his bunk aside, removes the ceiling panel, and pulls himself up into the dark crawl space. He wriggles through, crawling slowly, inch by inch, until he finds a vent leading into the chief jailer's apartment, which, conveniently, is empty for the night. He drops down silently. He's free. Bundy changes into the jailer's clothes, grabs some cash left behind, and walks right out the front door. No alarms, no shouts, just a man walking into the night. When guards check his cell the next morning, they find an empty bed, a hole in the ceiling, and a heart-stopping realization. Ted Bundy is gone. Again. But this time, he won't be caught so quickly. Bundy heads south. He steals a car and drives all the way to Florida, over 1,400 miles away. He uses stolen IDs and fake names, sometimes Chris Hagen, sometimes Kenneth Meisner. He rents a small room near Florida State University in Tallahassee. He tells people he's a graduate student. He's clean-cut, friendly, and polite. But deep down, Bundy is unraveling. He's broke, isolated, and paranoid. And that's when his old urges come back, stronger than ever. On the night of January 15th, 1978, Bundy enters the Chi Omega sorority house near the FSU campus. It's 2:45 a.m. He carries a piece of firewood in his hand. Inside, the house is dark and quiet, filled with sleeping college girls. What happens next will shock the entire country. Within minutes, Bundy brutally attacks 4 women, killing 2 of them. He leaves as quietly as he came, disappearing into shadows. When police arrive, they find chaos, broken glass, blood, and horror. But one clue stands out: a bite mark on one of the victims. Forensic experts take photos, knowing that someday it might be the one thing that finally catches him. Bundy doesn't stop there. Days later, he attacks again. A 12-year-old girl named Kimberly Leach disappears from her school in Lake City, Florida. Her body is found weeks later. By now, Bundy is America's most wanted man. His photo is everywhere. But even then, he believes he's smarter than everyone else. He steals another car and drives north, heading for freedom. But his arrogance catches up with him. On February 15, 1978, in Pensacola, Florida, a routine traffic stop changes everything. Officer David Lee spots a stolen orange Volkswagen Beetle, the same type of car linked to multiple disappearances. He pulls it over. The driver tries to run but is quickly tackled to the ground. As Lee handcuffs him, the man struggles and shouts, "I wish you'd killed me." At the station, they find stolen credit cards, fake IDs, and disguises. But when they ask for his name, he refuses to say. It takes days before he finally admits it. "I'm Ted Bundy," he says softly. And with those 3 words, the man who terrified America was finally caught. Outside, the nation breathes again. The charming killer who fooled everyone, police, judges, women, and even himself, is finally behind bars. But deep inside, Bundy isn't finished yet. He knows his trial will be the biggest in Florida history. He knows cameras will be on him, and he plans to use them. Because for Ted Bundy, it's never really been about killing. It's been about control. And soon, the world will see just how far he's willing to go to keep it. It's June 1979, and the heat in Miami is suffocating. The courthouse buzzes like a hornet's nest. Reporters shoulder cameras, news vans line the streets, and people gather just to glimpse the man who became America's living nightmare. Ted Bundy, the charming, smiling law student turned accused killer, walks through the courtroom doors in a crisp suit, grinning like he's attending a press conference instead of a murder trial. But this isn't just any trial. This is the first televised murder trial in U.S. history, and Bundy loves it. The room goes silent as the judge enters. Cameras flash. The crowd leans forward. Bundy sits confidently at the defense table, flipping through notes as if he's the attorney, not the accused. He insists on defending himself, a decision that shocks everyone. even his court-appointed lawyers. Bundy doesn't trust anyone. He wants to control his own story. He smiles at the jury, cracks jokes with the press, and occasionally turns to flash that same grin that once fooled so many. But beneath that calm exterior, there's chaos, because for the first time, the evidence is overwhelming. The Chi Omega sorority murders have haunted Tallahassee since January 1978. Two young women, Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman, lost their lives in their own dorm rooms. Two others survived brutal injuries. And the only clue that could tie the attacker to the scene was a bite mark. The prosecution knows it's their key. Forensic odontologists, experts in dental identification, carefully compare Bundy's teeth to the bite mark found on one of the victims. Bundy's teeth are crooked in a unique way. One front tooth slightly twisted, another chipped. The pattern matches perfectly. When the experts reveal this in court, the room freezes. Cameras zoom in on Bundy's face. For the first time, his smile fades. But Bundy quickly recovers. He objects loudly, cross-examines witnesses himself, and tries to charm the jury. At one point, he even flirts with a witness, smiling, complimenting her, turning the courtroom into his personal stage. He calls himself Mr. Bundy, acting like he's above everyone else. Reporters describe him as confident, intelligent, even charismatic. But to investigators, it's obvious he's playing a role. Bundy knows millions are watching him. He's no longer just fighting for his freedom. He's feeding his ego. Then comes one of the strangest moments in any courtroom in American history. During the trial, Bundy calls Carol Boone, a woman who had believed in his innocence for years, to the stand. She's a former co-worker who moved to Florida just to be near him. As she takes the stand, Bundy looks her in the eyes and says, "Carol and Boone, will you marry me?" She gasps. The courtroom erupts. The judge bangs his gavel, shouting for order. But Bundy knows what he's doing. In Florida law at that time, a declaration of marriage in open court, with a judge present, counts as a legal marriage. And just like that, Ted Bundy, on trial for murder, is now a married man. It's not love, it's control. Control over the narrative. Control over the headlines. Control, his favorite weapon. Still, the evidence keeps stacking up. A sorority sister testifies that she saw a man leaving the Chi Omega house that night. Tall, clean-cut, wearing a dark jacket. Police officers describe Bundy's arrest in Pensacola, how he fought, how he refused to reveal his identity. And the forensic team walks the jury through the most damning clues. Fibers from Bundy's car matching fibers found on the victims. Shoe prints that match his size, and that unmistakable bite mark. Every detail paints the same picture. Ted Bundy was there. By July 24th, 1979, the jury begins deliberations. It takes them just 6 hours to reach a verdict. When they return, the judge asks, "Have you reached a decision?" The foreman stands. "Yes, Your Honor. We find the defendant, Theodore Robert Bundy, guilty of murder in the first degree." The courtroom erupts. Gasps, tears, cheers. Reporters rush into phones. Bundy sits still, blinking slowly. Then, unbelievably, he smiles. Even with a death sentence looming, he acts like he's the star of his own movie, because in his mind, he's still in control. A few months later, he's tried again, this time for the kidnapping and murder of Kimberly Leach, the 12-year-old schoolgirl from Lake City. Prosecutors describe the evidence in haunting detail. Eyewitness accounts, fibers, and Bundy's car found near the crime scene. The verdict, guilty. And once again, the sentence is death. Judge Edward Cowart looks down from the bench and says something that will become legendary. "It is ordered that you be put to death by a current of electricity sufficient to cause your death. Take care of yourself, young man." I say that sincerely. You'd have made a good lawyer, and I'd have loved to have you practice in front of me. But you went another way, partner. The courtroom falls silent. Even the judge, a man who just sentenced someone to die, seems to acknowledge Bundy's strange intelligence. But Bundy only nods, calm as ever. In prison, Bundy becomes something of a celebrity. Reporters interview him. Fans send letters, and documentaries start forming around his case. He gives long, manipulative interviews, speaking about psychology, politics, and even religion. anything but guilt. He insists he's innocent, calling the system unfair or the evidence flawed. He flirts with journalists, cracks jokes, and signs autographs for people who send photos. But behind the charm, there's panic. Because Bundy knows his time is running out. His lawyers appeal the verdict, then appeal again. Each time they're denied. The clock keeps ticking toward the electric chair, Florida's infamous Old Sparky. In his final years, Bundy starts to talk. He agrees to interviews with investigators, hoping to delay his execution by confessing to some of his crimes. And what he reveals chills the nation. He describes crimes stretching across 7 states: Washington, Oregon, Utah, Colorado, Idaho, Florida, and possibly more. Dozens of victims, all young women, all vanished without a trace. Bundy doesn't show emotion. He tells the stories as if he's discussing the weather. No remorse, no fear, just a man who believes he's smarter than death itself. By 1988, America is done waiting. The appeals have failed. The governor signs the final death warrant. Reporters flood to Florida State Prison once more. Crowds gather outside, holding signs, some chanting, some praying. The world's most famous serial killer is finally facing the one thing he can't manipulate: his own end. Inside, Bundy grows desperate. He offers new confessions to delay the inevitable, promising details about unsolved cases in exchange for time. But Florida officials have made up their minds. January 24th, 1989. The execution is set for sunrise. Bundy's charm has finally run out. His smile, once his most dangerous weapon, now means nothing. Yet even on that final night, he can't stop talking. To the guards, to the chaplain, to the reporters, he's still trying to control the story. Outside the prison gates, hundreds of people hold signs that read, "Burn Bundy, burn." The crowd cheers as the lights flicker inside, signaling that the current has been turned on. For the first time in years, America feels relief. The man who once fooled everyone, with his smile, his voice, his lies, is gone. It's the early 1990s. Ted Bundy is gone, but his shadow still stretches across America. In classrooms, police stations, and FBI offices, his name is whispered not as a man, but as a lesson, a warning about how far charm and manipulation can go before the mask finally cracks. Because Ted Bundy didn't just commit crimes, he changed how America understood crime itself. And his case forced the nation to confront a terrifying truth. Evil doesn't always look like evil. Let's rewind a bit. Before Bundy, the word serial killer wasn't part of everyday vocabulary. Police departments worked alone, often unaware that similar crimes were happening in other states. There were no national databases, no behavioral profiles, no unified system to track patterns. If a young woman disappeared in Washington, investigators in Utah or Colorado might never even hear about it. Bundy used that silence as his camouflage. He moved from city to city, state to state, changing cars, names, and faces. He watched the news, adjusted his behavior, and always stayed one step ahead. Until the FBI Behavioral Science Unit, the same team later made famous in Mindhunter, began piecing his patterns together. Bundy's crimes became the blueprint for how agents studied psychological profiling. In 1979, while Bundy's trial was making headlines, a young FBI agent named Robert Ressler was quietly building something new. He and other agents like John Douglas and Burgess started interviewing convicted killers to find what they called signatures, the personal habits or compulsions behind their crimes. When they studied Bundy's behavior, they found something chilling. He wasn't killing out of rage, revenge, or desperation. He was killing for control, the same control he used to charm women, talk his way out of arrests, and even manipulate judges. Bundy's psychological pattern was clear. He selected victims who reminded him of someone, usually young, attractive women with long brown hair parted down the middle. He often approached them in daylight, pretending to be injured, carrying a cast or crutches. He asked for help, and when they let their guard down, he struck. It was the ultimate performance, a smiling face hiding a predator's mind. Psychologists later described Bundy as a high-functioning sociopath, someone who could mimic empathy without feeling it. He read people like books, spotting weakness, curiosity, and trust within seconds. But the part that fascinated and horrified experts the most was his arrogance. Even after his capture, Bundy believed he could talk his way out of anything. He gave TV interviews, lecture on crime, and analyzed himself in the third person, as if he were a scholar studying another man's sins. In one chilling interview, he told a journalist, "I'm the most cold-blooded son of a B*** H you'll ever meet, but I'll still smile at you." It wasn't a confession. It was a boast. But Bundy's manipulative nature didn't just fool strangers. It fooled people who should have known better. His girlfriend, Elizabeth Klopfer, struggled for years to accept the truth. She had reported him to police multiple times before his arrest, but each time they dismissed her fears. Bundy was too polite, too educated, too normal. He didn't fit the idea of a killer, and that's what made him so dangerous. Elizabeth later wrote in her memoir, The Phantom Prince, that she remembered waking up at night to find Bundy gone, only to see him return before dawn, smelling of dirt and pine. When she asked where he'd been, he'd smile and say, "Just went for a drive." She wanted to believe him. America wanted to believe him, and he used that belief like a weapon. After his execution, the FBI spent years dissecting Bundy's every move. They mapped his routes across the country, matched his victims' timelines, and used his case to train new agents. Bundy's interviews became essential study material for criminal profilers. His words, tone, and contradictions taught investigators how to recognize manipulation, not through what a killer says, but how they say it. Bundy's ability to switch from calm charm to sudden coldness became a classic red flag in behavioral profiling. And his arrogance, that fatal belief that he was smarter than everyone else, became the downfall psychologists warned about in similar offenders. Even now, decades later, Bundy's influence seeps into pop culture and criminology. Movies, documentaries, podcasts, all still trying to answer the same question. How could someone like Ted Bundy exist? Experts say Bundy's case was a turning point for America's fear of the familiar. Before him, people believed danger looked obvious. The stranger in the alley, the creepy man in the shadows. After him, people started locking doors not just against strangers, but against charm. Parents warned daughters to never trust a man who seemed too nice. Police departments began sharing data across states. And the FBI's serial crime unit became permanent, thanks in large part to Bundy. He changed law enforcement forever, not through lessons of justice, but through fear. Bundy's behavior even influenced how universities and workplaces approached personal safety. Self-defense programs for women grew rapidly in the late 1970s and early 80s. Posters urged caution, teaching people to recognize manipulation tactics, the same ones Bundy used. "Can you help me with this? Can you come in my car for just a second?" Those lines, once harmless, became warnings. The world had learned a painful lesson. But perhaps the most haunting part of Ted Bundy's story isn't what he did. It's how he wanted to be remembered. He spent his final years trying to rewrite his legacy, hoping to be seen not as a monster, but as an intelligent man gone wrong. He wanted books, documentaries, and psychology students to study him like a case, not a killer. And in a way, he got his wish. Because today, decades after his death, Bundy's face still appears on screens and in textbooks, a reminder of the smiling evil that once walked among us. Still, many mysteries remain. To this day, no one knows the exact number of Bundy's victims. He confessed to more than 30 murders, but investigators believe there were many more, across states, highways, and even countries. He took their names with him to the grave, but the silence he left behind still speaks volumes, a warning echoing through time. Because the most terrifying monsters aren't the ones hiding in the dark. They're the ones who look you in the eye, shake your hand, and smile. It's January 1989, the final days of Ted Bundy's life. The air around Florida State Prison is heavy, thick with humidity and dread. Outside the gates, a crowd of nearly 2,000 people is gathered. Some are praying quietly. Others are cheering, waving signs that read, "Burn, Bundy, burn." But inside, the man who once terrified a nation is pacing his small cell. For the first time, the great manipulator has no one left to charm. He's run out of appeals, run out of excuses. And worst of all, run out of time. The FBI, journalists, and detectives from all over the country are waiting. Bundy has something they want. Answers. Where are the missing women? How many were there, really? Bundy knows he can't escape now, but he can still control the story. So he begins to talk. On January 23rd, just one day before his scheduled execution, Bundy sits down with investigators from Washington State and Utah. He's pale, thinner than ever, but still calm. His voice is steady, disturbingly steady. He starts describing the locations of bodies, the tools he used, and the way he selected his victims. Every detail is chilling. Every word drips with arrogance. He talks about some of his crimes in the third person, saying things like, "The killer probably went back to the site a few times, just to make sure. The agents know what he's doing. He's distancing himself, pretending it's someone else." But Bundy isn't fooling anyone anymore. He describes how he buried some victims deep in the woods, others near highways, and even revisited certain sites days later. He speaks like he's recalling a science experiment, cold, clinical, and detached. It's clear now. Ted Bundy doesn't understand remorse. He understands attention. When asked why he killed, Bundy blames everything but himself. He points to addiction, to loneliness, to childhood struggles. He even tries to shift responsibility to pornography, claiming it warped his mind. But those listening know better. Bundy isn't confessing to clear his conscience. He's confessing to stay relevant, to delay his execution just one more day. It's one final manipulation from a man who lived on manipulation. By nightfall, the interviews are over. The guards escort Bundy back to his cell. For the first time in years, he's quiet. No cameras, no attention, no control. He eats his final meal, steak, eggs, hash browns, toast, milk, and juice. He barely touches it. Outside, the crowd begins to chant louder. The reporters prepare their microphones. And the switch, old Sparky, Florida's electric chair, waits in silence. At 7:06 a.m., January 24th, 1989, Ted Bundy is led into the execution chamber. He looks around the room, at the witnesses, the guards, the press. And for once, there's no smile. His last words are simple. "Jim and Fred, I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends." Moments later, 2,000 volts surge through his body. At 7:16 a.m., Theodore Robert Bundy is pronounced dead. Outside, the crowd erupts. They cheer, they clap, they wave homemade signs. Some throw fireworks into the air. The nightmare is over, or so they think, because what Ted Bundy left behind wasn't just horror. It was a legacy of fear and fascination. His crimes forever changed how America understood evil. Bundy forced investigators to create new systems, national databases, victim profiling, interstate task forces, tools that would later catch killers like Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, and BTK. He turned the spotlight on law enforcement failures, inspiring a complete overhaul in how missing persons and murder cases were tracked. And he taught ordinary people a haunting truth. Evil doesn't always look dangerous. Sometimes it looks like the boy next door. More than 30 years later, Ted Bundy's name still echoes through America's collective memory, whispered in documentaries, studied in psychology classes, dramatized in movies. But here's what most people forget. Bundy wasn't a monster from another world. He was human, a man who walked among us, smiling, charming, pretending. And that's what made him truly terrifying. Bundy's case wasn't just about death. It was about deception. It forced the world to confront the uncomfortable truth that the real danger often hides behind normalcy, behind a perfect smile, a steady voice, a polite handshake. It showed that monsters don't always crawl out of the dark. Sometimes they stand right beside us in broad daylight, and we never notice until it's too late. Today, the highways he once drove are just roads again. The cities where he hunted are filled with new faces who know his name but not his fear. Yet every so often, when a new case shocks the nation, when another seemingly ordinary face hides extraordinary evil, investigators, psychologists, and journalists all come back to one man, Ted Bundy, the killer who fooled America, the man who forced us to redefine what dangerous really means, the man who smiled at the world until the world finally saw the truth behind that smile. Evil doesn't vanish when a monster dies. It lingers in the stories, in the lessons, in the faces of the people left behind. Ted Bundy's case wasn't just a crime story. It was a warning, a reminder that trust can be broken by the people who were the warmest smiles, and that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones who look just like us. If this story made you think, made you feel something, or helped you understand the truth behind America's most terrifying case, then please take a second right now to like this video. It helps this story reach more people, so we never forget what happens when evil hides in plain sight. And if you love true crime, real investigations, and stories that uncover what really happens behind the headlines, subscribe and turn on notifications, because every week we bring you new, chilling stories that dig deeper than the news ever could.